Part 1. The hum of the server rack was the only sound in the room, a digital heartbeat that Gavilan usually found soothing. It represented control. On the mahogany table sat a ruggedized tablet, its screen glowing with an image of the Hacienda de las Sombras. 100 men? Gavilan didn't look up. He traced the perimeter wall on the screen with a scarred fingertip. The Federation doesn't waste that kind of overhead on a warehouse unless they're hiding a president. It's not a president, Jefe, a voice croaked from the shadows of the corner. Gavilan turned. The informant was a boy, barely 20, named Lucho. He was a low-level runner, the kind of friction filler the cartel chewed up by the thousands. But Lucho was different today. He wasn't twitching, he wasn't sweating. He sat with his hands in his lap, his posture so perfectly still it looked skeletal. Then what is it? Gavilan asked, his voice a low predator's growl. Everything, Lucho said, barely audible. Gavilan paused. He looked at his second-in-command, a woman named Mace, who was currently checking the action on her custom carbine. She offered a tight, cynical smirk. Kid's been hitting the product he's talking about, boss. I don't use, Lucho said, his eyes finally meeting Gavilan's. Gavilan froze. Lucho's eyes weren't bloodshot. They weren't dilated. They were deep. There was a distance to his pupils that felt like looking down a long, dark hallway. The Federation found something in the mountains, Lucho continued, his voice devoid of any regional accent, flat and rhythmic. A product that doesn't need to be smuggled. It doesn't need to be sold. It just needs to be thought. Once you see it, you own it. And once you own it, you realize you never owned anything else. Not your name, not your breath, not anything. Gavilan stood, walking toward the boy. He was a head taller, a man built of violence and expensive tactical nylon. He leaned in close, letting the scent of his own lethality fill the space. I'm bringing 50 of my best. We have thermal, we have jamming, we have high-velocity rounds that turn a human rib cage into confetti. Are those men guarding your product bulletproof, Lucho? Lucho didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He simply leaned forward. They're waiting for you, Lucho whispered. And for a split second, the fluorescent light above flickered. In that blink of darkness, Gavilan felt a cold spike of vertigo as if the floor had dropped an inch. They're waiting for us, Lucho repeated. 50 bodies. Such a nice number. Lucho finished, looking directly into Gavilan's eyes. Gavilan pulled back, his hand instinctively resting on the grip of his sidearm. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavy, like it was saturated with invisible water. Mace, Gavilan said, his voice cracking just enough for him to hate himself for it. Get the trucks. Full kit. Night vision, thermals, gas. If it's irretrievable, we'll burn the house and everyone in it down to the ground. Lucho smiled. It wasn't a human smile. It was too wide, showing teeth that looked like they had been polished by 1,000 years of sand. Yes, the boy said. Bring the lights. They're tired of the dark. Part 2. The dust of the Chihuahuan desert swirled around 2 blacked-out armored SUVs and an armored truck. 50 soldiers moved in a synchronized dance of nylon and steel. This wasn't a gang. It was a private army. Gavilan stood by the lead vehicle, his eyes on the horizon where the Hacienda de las Sombras sat like a jagged tooth against the purple sky. Check your feeds, Mace barked, her voice cutting through the low thrum of the idling engines. She slapped the shoulder of Viper, their lead sniper. Already on it, Mama, Viper grunted, adjusting the cheek rest on his .300 blackout. Tortuga, a massive man carrying a door-breaching ram and an oversized shield, bumped fists with Cuchillo, the squad's youngest scout. Cuchillo was obsessively sharpening a blade that was already surgical. Hey, kid, Tortuga rumbled. If you trip over your own feet tonight, I'm leaving you for the crows. You'll be too busy huffing and puffing to catch me, old man, Cuchillo retorted, though his hand shook slightly as he sheathed the steel. Near the trunk of the second SUV, Ghost and Wraith, Twin sisters who handled the drone recon were synchronized in their movements. They didn't speak, they just swapped battery packs and tablets in a blur of motion. "Signal is clear," Ghost said, her eyes fixed on the flickering green screen. "Too clear," Wraith added, her brow furrowed. "There's no electronic noise from the house. No Wi-Fi, no radio, no cell pings. It's a dead zone." Padre, the unit's medic, was surreptitiously marking a small cross in oil on the crew until he got to the forehead of Sapo, the heavy gunner. "Keep your superstitions away from me, Padre," Sapo growled, though he didn't move away. Sapo was half checked out, his eyes already beginning the 1,000-yard stare he got before a slaughter. "It's not for superstition, Sapo," Padre whispered. "Something doesn't feel right about this." "Does it ever?" Sapo replied. Finally, there was Rico, the tech savant who had liberated their encryption software from a dead DEA agent. He was staring at Lucho, who sat in the back of the lead truck like a passenger on a funeral bus. "Boss," Rico muttered, hesitating slightly before leaning toward Gavilan. "I ran a biometric scan on the kid while he was sleeping. The software must have crashed. It said his heart rate was 0. Not low, Jefe. 0. Gavilan looked at Lucho, then his 9 lieutenants, his inner circle: Viper, Tortuga, Cuchillo, Ghost, Wraith, Padre, Sapo, Rico, and Mace. With him, they made the 10 Fingers of Death. A name they achieved through brutality and efficiency, a name Gavilan intended to keep. "Equipment failure," Gavilan said, his voice hard, trying to kill the doubt. "We move in 5. Standard breach. Mace, you take the twins and Sapo for the rear. Viper stays on the ridge. The rest of you, on me." "We've done worse than this, Jefe," Mace said, checking the seal on her gas mask. She reached out and tightened a loose strap on Gavilan's vest, a gesture of intimacy that went back to their days in the infantry. 100 rivals is just a long night's work." "It's not the 100 I'm worried about," Gavilan admitted, his voice barely a whisper. He looked back at the 10 Fingers. They were the best money could buy and the best loyalty could forge. He didn't know that by dawn, the very idea of a finger or a man would be a joke the universe was playing on him. "Mount up," Gavilan commanded. As the doors slammed shut almost in unison, the sound echoed across the desert. Not like a car door, but like the heavy lid of a sarcophagus clicking into place. The 3 armored SUVs glided down the dirt road toward the Hacienda de las Sombras, running dark. No headlights, no brake lights. To any ordinary observer, they were just 3 blocks of shifting shadow cutting through the Chihuahuan dusk. Inside the vehicles, the silence was thick, broken only by the rhythmic click of tactical gear and the heavy breathing of 50 soldiers preparing for a breach. But as the gap between the convoy and the compound shrank, the air inside the trucks began to change. It wasn't a sudden drop in temperature. It was a subtle alteration in weight, like the atmosphere was thickening into oil. The ridge, Viper's isolation. 2 kilometers out, the big truck tapped its brakes just long enough for Viper to ride out on the dirt bike they kept stored on the trailer truck. He moved towards the rocky ridge that overlooked the valley. He set up his .300 caliber rifle, deployed the bipod, and slid behind the thermal optic. "Viper in position," he murmured into his throat mic. "I've got the whole layout. Looks like a tomb down there. Boss, I've got thermal eyes on the perimeter, but it's weird. The heat signatures, they're static, like they're painted on the walls. Check your comms and say again, Viper, what about heat signatures? There must be some kind of magnetic field over the ridge interfering with communications," Gavilan responded. Viper exhaled inaudibly as Gavilan was speaking, looking through the high-end lens again. The hacienda was a block of stark, cold green. But as he adjusted the focus ring, he blinked. The thermal signatures of the guards on the roof weren't moving. They were standing perfectly erect, but the heat wasn't radiating from their cores. The orange glow was concentrated entirely in their mouths. It looked as though each man was holding a single hot coal between his teeth. Viper pulled his eye away from the scope, rubbing his face. When he looked back, the orange glow was normal. Right, sorry boss, it must have been a calibration error with the stolen military tech, Viper finished. Copy, Gavilan acknowledged. Viper lowered his hand to adjust his windage knob, but stopped. The rocks around him were vibrating, not with a sound, but with a rhythmic pulsing thrum that matched his own heartbeat perfectly. When his heart beat, a pebble shifted. When he held his breath, the desert went dead silent. In the lead vehicle, Gavilan sat shotgun, his eyes fixed on Lucho through the rearview mirror. Beside him, Rico was frantically tapping the screen of his ruggedized tablet. "Signal's drifting, boss," Rico whispered, his thumb scrolling through lines of diagnostic code. "The GPS says we're currently driving through the Gulf of Mexico. It keeps throwing a localized error. Geometry out of bounds. I've never even seen that script before." Gavilan didn't answer. He was watching Lucho. The boy hadn't blinked in 4 minutes. Gavilan reached down to check the cylinder of his revolver, a comforting habit. He slid the crane out, checking the brass casings. 6 rounds. He snapped it shut. Click. A second later, he heard the exact same click echo from the empty glove box in front of him. He stared at the plastic panel. Then, a third click sounded from beneath his own seat. He reached down, searching the floorboards, but found nothing but cold steel. In the back row, Tortuga was checking the straps on his ballistic shield. He pulled a heavy tactical flashlight from his vest, clicking it on to check the lens. The beam flickered, casting a stark white circle on the floor. But the shadow cast by his own hand didn't match his movement. When Tortuga balled his hand into a fist, the shadow on the floor remained flat, its fingers extended, pointing directly at the floorboards beneath them. Tortuga blinked, shook his head, and clicked the light off, gripping his rifle tighter. Beside him, Cuchilla was running his thumb along the edge of his combat knife. He was fast, practiced. But as the truck bounced over a rut, he felt a sharp, icy sting. He looked down, expecting to see a bead of crimson on his thumb. There was a cut, deep enough to expose the white of the dermis, but nothing came out. The wound was perfectly dry, the flesh inside a pale, bloodless gray. He squeezed his thumb, forcing the pressure, but the cut simply sat there, open and yawning like a tiny mouth, before a drop of sweat from his palm filled it. A second later, the pain vanished entirely, leaving his thumb completely numb. Truck 2, the rear guard, Mace, sat in the second vehicle, her eyes locked on the tactical clock on her wrist. The digital numbers were rolling backward. 0314, 0313, 0312. She tapped the glass. It flipped back to normal, but the colon between the hours and minutes wasn't flashing. It was stretching, the 2 dots bleeding together into a single vertical line. She looked over at Sapo. The heavy gunner was staring out the blackened window into the desert. He was chewing a piece of stale gum, his jaw moving in a slow, hypnotic grind. "Sapo," Mace muttered. "Stay sharp." Sapo didn't turn his head. "You hear that, Mama?" "Hear what?" "The radio. They're playing the song from my sister's wedding." Mace listened. There was nothing but the low hum of the tires on dirt and the encrypted hiss of the secure comms channel. "There's no music, Sapo." "Yeah, there is," Sapo said, his voice flat, completely devoid of emotion. "It's just real quiet, under the engine. It's the part where the priest tells everyone to kneel." In the seat behind them, the twins, Ghost and Wraith, were holding their twin drone controllers. Their screens were identical, picking up the video feed from the scout drone hovering 100 feet above the hacienda. Ghost's screen showed the courtyard, empty, paved in Spanish tile. Wraith's screen showed the exact same courtyard, but in her feed the tiles were gone. The ground beneath the hacienda looked like a massive and swirling whirlpool of black sand, with the walls of the compound hovering precariously over the lip of the vortex. "Look at Sector 3, Wraith whispered, pointing to her screen. Ghost looked. On her monitor, Sector 3 was just a concrete wall. "What am I looking at?" "The shadow," Wraith said. On her screen, the shadow of the hacienda's eastern wall wasn't stretching away from the moon. It was stretching toward it, defying the angle of the light. Before Ghost could respond, Padre, sitting in the very back with his medical kit, gasped softly. He had been quietly reciting a Hail Mary under his breath, his fingers tracing a small wooden rosary inside his pocket. He pulled his hand out. The wooden beads were gone. In his palm lay a handful of smooth white teeth, strung together by a piece of black tactical paracord. He stared at them, his breath catching in his throat, before quickly shoving them back into his pocket, his heart hammering a frantic, terrified rhythm against his ribs.